The dust in the church was thick enough to taste, a fine grit that settled on the rough-hewn pine benches and coated the dry tongues of the few souls gathered to watch. It was a Tuesday in a town that had not seen rain in 6 months. The air outside shimmered with heat, but inside the small, stifling building, the mood was cold. Evelyn stood at the altar, her hand trembling in the grasp of the man beside her. She was 18 years old. The man, Harland Riggs, was rumored to be 40 or perhaps 50. No one knew for sure, and no one dared to ask. He was a man of property, a widower twice over, with a ranch that spread across 3 counties and a silence that was heavier than any shout. His thumb pressed into the back of her hand, a hard, possessive gesture, as her father, the preacher, rushed the words. Evelyn kept her eyes fixed on the cracked wooden cross behind her father's head. She could not look at him, at this man who had bartered her, his only daughter, to cover a gambling debt that had shamed his ministry and ruined their name. The whispers had followed him for weeks, and this wedding was the only thing that silenced them. This, and the heavy purse Harland had delivered to the parsonage 2 nights before. "And do you, Evelyn, take this man?" She felt the pressure of Harland's gaze, hot and heavy as the drought-stricken air. She smelled the whiskey on his breath, a sour note beneath the sweat and the dust. She wanted to choke. She wanted to run. But she saw her father's desperate, pleading eyes and the thinness of her mother's frame in the front pew, a woman already worn down to nothing by her husband's failures. "I do." The words were a whisper, stolen by the dry air. It was enough. Harland's grip tightened, bruising her fingers as he slid a thick gold band onto her hand. It was too large. It felt like a shackle. The walk from the church to Harland's ranch house, which sat on the edge of the parched town, was a blur. He did not own a buggy. He made her walk beside him, his hand clamped on her upper arm. The white dress she wore, her mother's remade, was already stained with the pale orange dust of the road. Townsfolk watched from their porches, their faces blank, offering no comfort. She was property now. Moving from one owner to the next, the house was large, dark, and smelled of stale tobacco and old grief. A lone servant girl, eyes downcast, scurried away as they entered. "Upstairs," Harland grunted, releasing her arm only to shove her toward the staircase. She climbed, each step a hammer blow against her heart. The bridal suite, he had called it, the room where his other wives had slept. It was lit by a single candle on the nightstand, casting long, monstrous shadows. The room was clean, but stark. A heavy bed frame, a wash basin, a tall wardrobe. Harland followed her in and shut the door. The sound of the lock clicking into place made her flinch. He did not look at her. He walked to the wash basin, poured a glass of whiskey from a decanter, and drank it in one swallow. He poured another. Evelyn stood by the door, her hands clutched so tightly her nails bit into her palms. She was a preacher's daughter. She knew what was expected. She knew her duty, but her body was rigid with a terror that went beyond mere maidenly nerves. This was not nervousness. This was the cold, hard premonition of violation. Harland turned, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes raked over her. "Take it off." She fumbled with the tiny pearl buttons on the back of the dress, her fingers numb and clumsy. "Slow," he growled, sitting on the edge of the bed. The ropes creaked beneath his weight. "I want to watch." She turned her back to him, a small, useless gesture of modesty. As she worked the buttons, her eyes scanned the room, desperate for anything, for some sign that this was a normal place. And then she saw it. Hanging from a peg on the wall, near the wardrobe, was a thick leather belt. It was not a belt for holding up trousers. It was heavy, dark, and oiled, coiled like a snake in the dim light. Her breath hitched. Her fingers froze. She forced her gaze away, down to the nightstand beside the bed. The drawer was slightly open. Something inside glinted in the candlelight. Metal. She took a shaky step closer, pretending to inspect a loose thread on the quilt. She nudged the drawer with her hip. A pair of metal handcuffs lay inside. nestled against a small, velvet-lined box. A cold, sharp scream tried to claw its way up her throat, but she swallowed it down. This was not a bridal suite. This was a slaughterhouse. The belt on the wall, the medal in the drawer, the memory of his other wives, both dead, both young. "I said, take it off," Harland repeated, his voice dropping. He stood up. The sound of his boots on the floorboards broke the spell. Fear, raw and absolute, flooded her system, drowning out duty, drowning out shame, drowning out everything but the primal urge to live. He reached for her. She bolted. She did not think. She wrenched the door handle, forgetting the lock, and slammed her shoulder into the wood. Pain shot up her arm. Harland laughed, a low, cruel sound. "Nowhere to run, little rabbit." He was wrong. She saw the window. It faced the back of the house, away from the town, toward the dark, rising canyons. She grabbed the heavy water pitcher from the wash basin and threw it. It missed him, shattering against the wall. But the surprise gave her a second. She grabbed the wooden chair and rammed it through the thin glass of the window. Cold night air hit her face. "You bitch!" he roared, lunging. She scrambled through the broken frame, not feeling the glass that tore at her dress and sliced her arms. She landed hard on the soft earth of a dead flower bed. The breath knocked from her lungs. She heard him crashing around the room, roaring her name. She got to her feet and ran. She was still in her white wedding dress, her feet bare. She ran from the house, across the dusty yard, past the silent barn, and into the scrub brush that marked the beginning of the wilderness. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she had to get away from the smell of whiskey and the sight of that coiled leather belt. Behind her, she heard shouting, "Get the horses, find her! She's mine!" Lights flared in the ranch hand's bunkhouse. Dogs began to bark. Evelyn plunged into the darkness of the canyon, the white dress a beacon in the moonlight. She tore at the skirt, ripping the heavy fabric away so she could move, but the bodice was too tight, constricting her lungs. She stumbled over rocks, her bare feet splitting open on the sharp shale. Sagebrush clawed at her, tearing the delicate lace of her dress and the skin beneath. She could hear the horses now, the thud of hooves, the coarse shouts of Harland's men. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs were jelly. She scrambled up a rocky incline, her hands raw and bleeding, and slipped, tumbling back down into a dry wash. She lay there for a moment, gasping, tasting the salt of her own tears and the copper of her blood. The moon slid behind a cloud, plunging the canyon into near-total darkness. The sounds of the chase seemed to move past her. Further up the canyon, she had a moment. She crawled on her hands and knees into a thicket of mesquite, pulling her torn dress around her, trying to make the white fabric disappear. She huddled, shivering. As two riders passed so close she could smell the sweat of their horses, they did not see her. She waited, every muscle screaming, until the sounds faded into the distance. Silence descended, broken only by her own ragged breathing and the far-off cry of a coyote. She could not stay there. They would find her at dawn. She forced herself to move, to crawl out of the wash and walk. She moved deeper into the wilderness, away from the town, away from the ranch, toward the high, cold ridges that touched the sky. The air grew thinner, the temperature plummeted. The rocks were sharp as knives, but her feet were so numb she barely felt them. She walked for hours, or maybe it was only minutes. Time had lost all meaning. There was only the cold, the pain, and the crushing weight of what she had done. She was a runaway wife. She was ruined. She climbed until she could climb no more. She reached a high, wind-swept ridge, the ground hard and barren. The wind cut through the remnants of her dress as if she were naked. She stumbled, her ankle turning, and fell. She tried to get up. Her body would not obey. The cold had seeped into her bones, a deep, heavy lethargy. She was so tired. She curled into a ball on the frozen ground, the shredded white silk of her dress a mockery of the purity she had fled to protect. She closed her eyes. It would be warm, soon. Colt hated towns. He hated the smell of them, the noise of them, and the people who lived in them, passing judgment with their narrow eyes. He kept to the mountains, trapping and hunting, coming down only when the seasons forced it, to trade pelts for salt, coffee, and cartridges. He was tracking a buck, high on the ridges, looking for the last bit of winter game before the real snows hit. His horse, a steady gray gelding named Quiet, picked its way over the pre-dawn shale. Colt was already annoyed. The buck was long gone, spooked by something. He was about to turn back when Quiet stopped, lifting his head and snorting. His ears pricked forward. "What is it, boy?" Colt whispered, his hand instantly going to the rifle in its scabbard. He scanned the ridge. There was nothing, just rock and the skeleton of a long-dead pine. Then he saw it. It was just a patch of white, crumpled against the dark earth, looking like a patch of early snow. But it was not snow. He swung down from the saddle, his rifle in his hand, and approached slowly. It was a woman. She was lying on her side, half curled, her hair a dark spill against the white fabric. She was wearing a dress, a fine white dress, torn to ribbons. Her feet were bare, caked in dried blood and mud. Colt stopped a good 10 feet away. This was trouble. This was the kind of trouble that got a man hanged. A white woman, alone, on a mountain. Looking like this, he wanted no part of it. He should ride past. He should turn his horse and forget he ever saw her. He had spent years learning to avoid society. And this was society at its worst, crawling up his mountain to die. He took a step back. The woman let out a low, broken moan, a sound so small it was almost lost to the wind. He swore, loud and sharp, into the cold air. He could not leave her. He could not be the kind of man who rode past a dying creature, even if it was a human one. He slung his rifle over his back and knelt beside her. He touched her neck. The skin was ice cold, but there was a pulse, faint and thready as a spider's web. Her face was bruised, her lips blue. "Ma'am?" He nudged her shoulder. She did not respond. He sighed, the sound a white plume in the air. He had a small hunting cabin not 2 miles from here, a place he used for trapping in deep winter. It was rough, but it was shelter. He looked at her frail form. She weighed nothing. He slid his arms under her, one beneath her knees and one behind her back, and lifted. She was light as a bundle of dry sticks, and just as cold. The fabric of her dress was stiff with frost. He carried her to Quiet, who shied at the strange, limp burden. "Easy, boy. It's just trouble." He managed to swing into the saddle, settling her across his lap, her head lolling against his chest. She was burning up. The coldness of her skin was a lie. Beneath it, a fever was raging. He urged Quiet into a careful walk, shielding her from the wind with his own body as best he could. He rode back to the cabin, a one-room shelter built tight against a rock face, almost invisible until you were upon it. He kicked the door open and carried her inside. The cabin was cold and dark. He laid her gently on the narrow cot, which was just a wooden frame with rope strung across it, covered by a thin mattress and a pile of wool blankets. He worked quickly. He got the fire in the stone fireplace going, the dry wood catching with a roar. He lit the oil lamp, and in the flickering yellow light, he got his first good look at her. She was young, 18, maybe 19. Her face was covered in dirt and streaked with dried tears, but she was beautiful, in a pale, fragile way. Her hands were torn up. Her feet were a bloody mess. He went to the small spring behind the cabin and broke the thin ice to fill a bucket. He brought it back, setting it on the fire to warm, and tore a clean strip from an old shirt. He started with her feet. He had to be gentle, washing away the grit and the blood, trying to assess the damage. The cuts were deep. As the warm water touched her skin, she began to shiver, a violent, rattling tremor that shook the whole cot. Her eyes fluttered open, but they were not focused. They were wide, dark, and full of terror. "No," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Please don't." "You're safe, ma'am," Colt said gruffly. "Just cleaning you up. You're froze," she thrashed, trying to pull away from him. "The belt, I saw it. He's coming." Colt frowned. He put a hand on her shoulder to steady her. "There's no one here." "Just me. You're in my cabin." Her eyes finally landed on his face. The terror receded, replaced by a profound, fever-bright confusion. She looked at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling, at the fire, and then back at him. A small, strange smile touched her cracked lips. "Oh," she breathed. "It's an angel. Am I dead?" Colt pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. "No, ma'am. You're not dead. You're in the high country. Now hold still." He finished cleaning her feet, his touch all business. He found a small tin of pine tar salve and applied it to the worst of the cuts. She whimpered when he wrapped her feet in clean rags, but she didn't pull away again. She just watched him, her eyes heavy-lidded. He tended the gashes on her arms and hands from the window glass. He brought her a cup of lukewarm water from the bucket, holding her head up so she could drink. She took 2 small sips and fell back, her eyes closing. He stood up, looking down at her. She was a mess of contradictions. A fine white dress, ruined, bare, bloody feet. A fever that was making her see angels. He wanted her story, but he knew better than to ask. Asking was an invitation. Asking meant he was involved. He was already involved. He took his heaviest wool blanket and laid it over her. She burrowed into it, the shivering easing. He sat in the cabin's only other chair, a 3-legged stool he'd made himself, and began cleaning his rifle. He did not sleep. He watched her, and he watched the fire. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the corners of the cabin, and with the wind came the snow. It began as a few lazy flakes, drifting past the cabin's single small window, but by morning, it was a blinding, swirling curtain of white. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. Her body ached in places she did not know she had. Her feet were on fire, a dull, throbbing pain. Her throat was raw. She opened her eyes. She was in a small, dark room. A fire crackled in a hearth. She was in a bed, buried under a mountain of heavy blankets. A man sat at a small table, his back to her, sharpening a knife. The memories came back in a rush. The wedding, the belt, the handcuffs, the window, the chase, the cold. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness sent her crashing back onto the thin mattress. The man turned. He was not Harland. He was tall, even sitting, with broad shoulders that filled out his flannel shirt. His hair was dark and long, tied back at the nape of his neck. He had a beard, not a neat town beard, but a rough, wild one. His face was all harsh angles, weathered by wind and sun. He looked at her, his eyes a pale, clear gray, and they held no welcome. They just looked. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low and rough, like stones rubbing together. Evelyn shrank back. "Who are you? Where am I?" "Name's Colt. This is my trapping cabin. You're on Bear Ridge." He gestured to a tin mug of broth on the hearth. "Drink that. You've been out for 2 days. Fever's mostly broke." 2 days. She looked at the window. It was a solid, opaque white. "It's snowing," she whispered. "Been snowing," he corrected. "We're snowed in. 10, 12 feet in the drifts by now." Trapped. The word echoed in her mind. She had run from one trap only to land in another. She looked at him, truly looked at him. He was big, stronger than Harland, and they were alone. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. He raised an eyebrow, then went back to his knife, the rhythmic shing, shing, shing of the stone on steel filling the small cabin. "Right now, I want this blade to be sharp enough to skin a rabbit. After that, I'll likely want to eat the rabbit." His answer confused her. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound lecherous. He just sounded practical. You found me," she said. Near froze. "You were lucky. Or unlucky, depending on how you see it." Did you? She could not bring herself to ask. She touched the collar of her dress. It was still on her, though it was ripped and stained beyond repair. He understood. He didn't look up from his knife. "I cleaned your feet and your hands. You had glass in your arms. I wrapped them. Nothing else. A man doesn't take advantage of a half-dead woman. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. He was gruff, yes, but she felt a strange flicker of safety. His quiet distance was a balm after the hot, demanding presence of Harland. For 3 days, they existed in that cabin. The world shrank to those 4 walls. The storm howled outside, a constant, muffled scream. Inside, there was only the crackle of the fire, the sound of Colt cleaning his traps, and the scrape of a spoon against a bowl. He was a man of profound silence. He fed her broth and, when she was stronger, hardtack softened in stew. He rebandaged her feet every morning, his touch firm and impersonal, his gaze fixed only on the wounds. He never asked her name. He never asked how she came to be on his ridge in a wedding dress. He never asked where she was from or who was chasing her. His refusal to ask questions was the most unsettling thing of all. It confused her. It gave her space. But it was a cold, empty space. He didn't touch her. He slept on the floor by the fire, rolled in his bedroll, his back to her, his rifle always within reach. That, too, confused her. Harlan's hands had been on her instantly, pinching, gripping, claiming. This man, Colt, seemed to take up no more space than was absolutely necessary. He was a shadow, a presence, but not a threat. Not in the way Harland was. On the 4th day, the snow stopped. The silence that fell was sudden and absolute. Evelyn was strong enough to sit up, her feet propped on a stool. The fever was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a gnawing fear of what came next. That night, the cabin grew too warm. The fire was roaring, and Colt was restless. He stripped off his heavy flannel shirt to chop a new stack of kindling, not wanting to open the door and let the cold back in. He worked in the corner, his back to her, wearing only his undershirt, which was thin and worn. After a moment, he pulled that off. Too, his skin gleaming with a light sweat in the firelight. Evelyn watched him. She should have looked away. Her father would have called it sinful. Harland would have called it an invitation. But she watched. His back was a landscape of muscle, scarred and hard. He swung the hatchet with an easy, powerful grace, the muscles in his shoulders and arms bunching and releasing. He was not a soft man. He was built of the same hard, unforgiving material as the mountains he lived in. He was all corded sinew and lean strength, his skin browned by a sun she had not seen in days. She had been terrified of Harland's body, which was all soft flesh and heavy, possessive weight. She was not terrified of Colt's. She watched him lift a heavy log and place it on the block. She watched the line of his spine as he bent, the ripple of his back as he brought the hatchet down. Something stirred inside her, beneath the layers of shame and fear and duty. It was a feeling she had no name for. It was not gentle. It was a low, pulling ache, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. It was new, and it frightened her almost as much as the escape. The world outside the cabin was a great, white silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape buried in white, the sun a pale, distant disk in a blue sky. Inside, Evelyn's strength returned in small, painful increments. At first, it was just sitting up on the cot without the room spinning. Then, standing on her feet, the bandages on her soles thick, her weight uncertain. The cabin was tiny, but it felt like a ballroom on her first attempt to cross it. She made it to the fireplace, her hands braced on the cold stones, and felt a victory swell in her chest. Colt watched her, but said nothing. He had given her one of his old wool shirts, which hung on her like a tent, the sleeves rolled up a dozen times, and a pair of trousers he'd found in his pack. Held up with a length of rope, the white wedding dress lay in a heap in the corner, a ruined, muddy ghost. She refused to look at it. She began to claim a space in the cabin. She found his meager broom and swept the floor, a cloud of dust and ash rising. She tidied his stack of pelts. She washed his few dishes in the bucket of snow melt, her hands turning red in the icy water. These were the tasks of a woman, the tasks she knew. They anchored her in this small, rough space. She could be useful. She was not a victim. She was not a runaway. She was simply a person who cooked and cleaned. She found a small bag of flour and a tin of baking soda. That afternoon, she made a passable flatbread on the hearthstone. When Colt came in from checking his horse, the cabin smelled of more than just wood smoke and curing hides. He stopped, sniffing the air. He saw the bread, cooling on the table. "Made some," she said, her voice small, afraid he would be angry. He just grunted, pulled off his heavy coat, and sat. He tore a piece of the bread and ate it, chewing slowly. He looked at her. "It's good." She felt a flush of pleasure that was all out of proportion to the compliment. That night, as she stirred a thin stew made from one of his snared rabbits, he broke the quiet that had settled between them. "The snow's hard-packed on the ridges," he said, not looking at her. He was oiling his rifle, the methodical click and scrape a familiar rhythm in the cabin. "The wind's been at it, swept the pass." "Another week? Maybe 2. It'll be clear enough to ride." Evelyn's hand froze on the wooden spoon. "Soon as it is," he continued. "I'll ride you back to town." The spoon clattered from her fingers, splashing hot broth onto the floor. She stared at the small puddle, her heart turning to ice. Town. Back. She saw the church. She saw her father's desperate eyes. She saw the dust on the road. She saw the belt, coiled like a snake on the wall. She saw the glint of metal in the drawer. "No!" The word was a choked whisper. Colt stopped his work. He looked at her. "Ma'am?" "No," she said, louder this time. She backed away from the fire, putting the cot between them. "I won't go back. You can't make me." He stood up slowly, setting the rifle aside. He was not a man given to sudden movements. "I'm not making you do anything. You're from town. You belong in town. You can't stay here." "Why not?" she challenged, her voice shaking. "Because this is no place for you. Winter's not even set in proper. This is a trapping line, not a home. I'm not a man who keeps women." The panic was a living thing in her throat. She had to make him understand. She had to stop him. She couldn't go back to Harlan, but she couldn't tell him the truth, the whole truth. A runaway wife was a criminal. A man harboring one was, too. They would hang him for stealing property. "He'll kill me," she whispered. Colt frowned. "Who?" "Harlan. Harlan Riggs." The name felt like ash in her mouth. "He your man?" Colt's voice was flat, his eyes unreadable. A lie. She needed a lie, one that was close enough to the truth to taste real. "He's my stepfather." The lie hung in the small cabin. It felt thin, weak. My father died. My mother remarried. Harlan, he's a cruel man. He wanted—" She couldn't finish the thought. She looked down at her hands. "He beat me, for years. That night, he tried. I ran from him." She looked up, her eyes flooding with tears she hadn't faked. The terror was real. "If you take me back, he'll find me. He'll lock me up. Or he'll kill me. Please, don't take me back." Colt watched her. He was a man who knew the wilderness, and he knew a trap when he saw one. He knew this girl was lying. The story was too neat and too messy all at once. Stepfathers didn't chase girls into the wilderness with packs of men, and girls running from a stepfather didn't usually do it in a white wedding gown. But he also saw the terror in her eyes, and that was not a lie. He had seen that kind of terror before, in a deer cornered by wolves. He knew the name Harlan Riggs. Everyone in this territory knew it. A man who owned half the valley and had a reputation for breaking things, horses, men, and, it was rumored, his first 2 wives. He looked at her, this small, desperate thing in his oversized shirt. He had his own secrets. He had his own past, a past that made him an outcast. He understood, better than most, the need to run. He turned back to his rifle, picking up the oil rag. "Riggs," he said, the name a hard rock in the air. "I know the name." He didn't call her a liar. He didn't press. He just gave one. Sharp nod. "Eat your stew. It's getting cold." It was not forgiveness. It was not acceptance. It was a truce. He would not take her back. Not yet. The lie, and his silent acceptance of it, changed the air in the cabin. They were no longer rescuer and victim. They were 2 people in a box, waiting out the snow. The silence that fell between them was different. It was no longer empty. It was shared. They began to talk. Not about the past. The past was a locked door neither of them dared to knock on. They talked about small things, safe things. He told her how to read the sky, how the color of the sunset could predict the next day's weather. He taught her the names of the birds that wintered in the high country. She told him about the few books she had read, describing worlds so far from this hard, cold place. She spoke of the sea, which she had read about, but never seen. He listened. When she spoke, his full attention was on her. He didn't fidget or interrupt. He just listened, his pale gray eyes seeming to absorb her words. It was a novel feeling, to be listened to. Her father preached. Harlan commanded, "This man, he just was." She watched his hands. They were large, calloused and scarred, but they were gentle. She saw him reset a rabbit's broken leg in a small, splinted trap, his touch surprisingly delicate as he worked on the small creature before letting it go. "No sense in a slow death," he'd muttered. She saw him with his horse, quiet, when he went to the lean-to feed him. He would speak to the animal in a low, soft rumble, his hand rubbing the horse's neck, a tenderness he never showed her. She watched those hands mend a leather harness, the needle and all moving with a precision that was almost beautiful. One night, the cabin was thick with steam. He had hauled in 2 buckets of snow and melted them over the fire for a bath. He had given her the cabin, waiting outside in the freezing cold for half an hour while she washed, a gesture of decency that stunned her. Now it was his turn. He had the bucket in the corner, his back to her, washing the grit of the trail from his skin. She was on the cot, her hair damp and clean for the first time in a week, pretending to be asleep. She wasn't. She watched him through her eyelashes. The firelight played over his back, the one she had seen before. He moved to the basin on the table to wash his face, sluicing the hot water over his head and neck. He scrubbed at his beard, then braced his hands on the edge of the small, rickety table, his head bowed. She thought he was done. She opened her eyes. He was staring at her. He was staring at her through the steam rising from the basin, his hair dripping, his face stark and shadowed. It was not a look of lust, not the way Harlan had looked at her. It was something deeper, sharper. It was a look of profound, aching hunger, a look of loneliness. She did not move. She did not breathe. He saw her eyes were open. A dark, dull red crept up his neck. He looked away instantly, snatching a towel and turning his back to her, his shoulders rigid. She, however, did not look away. She continued to watch his back, her heart doing a strange, slow beat against her ribs. The snow began to melt under the relentless, high-altitude sun. The drifts shrank, revealing the hard, frozen earth. Evelyn insisted on helping. She was tired of the cot, tired of the cabin. She needed to feel the air on her skin. "I need to check the traps on the south ridge," he said, pulling on his boots. "I'll come," she said. "It's a 2-hour ride. The ground is rough." "I can ride," she said. It was a lie. She had ridden a plow mule. Once. He looked at her, his skepticism clear. "There's one horse. Then I will walk." He sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "We don't have time for that." He looked at her, standing there in his 2 large trousers, stubborn and frail. "Fine, but you do what I say." He led quiet from the lean-to. He mounted the gray gelding in one smooth motion, then looked down at her. He reached down a hand. "Come on, then." She placed her hand in his. His grip was hard and warm, and it closed around her small hand. Swallowing it, he pulled. She was shockingly light. He hauled her up, swinging her sideways, seating her behind him. "You'll have to ride aside," he said, his voice gruff. She settled on the horse's rump, her legs dangling on one side. She had nothing to hold on to. The horse shifted. She slipped, crying out. "Wrap your arms around my waist," he ordered, his back stiff. "And don't fall off." She hesitated. It was so intimate, but it was either that or the ground. She slowly, shyly, put her arms around him. His waist was solid. He was wearing his thick wool coat, but beneath it, she could feel the hard muscle of his back. He was a wall of heat. She pressed her cheek against his back, smelling the scent of him. Smoke, pine, horse, and the clean, sharp scent of cold air. He spurred quiet into a walk. The motion was jarring. She clung to him, her knuckles white. With every step the horse took, her body rocked against his. The contact was electric, a slow burn that started in her stomach and spread outward. She trembled, but she was not cold. They checked the traps. He showed her how to read the tracks, how to spot the faint print of a fox. He gave her the snared rabbits to hold, their bodies still warm. She did not flinch. She watched him reset the snares, his hands quick and sure. They worked together, a quiet, efficient team. The sun was warm on her face, and for the first time since her wedding day, she felt something that was almost peace. That night, the cabin was quiet. They sat by the fire. He was oiling a harness, and she was mending his shirt, the one he had given her to wear. Her stitches were small and neat, a skill her mother had drilled into her. She was thinking about the ride, about the feel of his body, so solid and safe. In front of her, she thought about Harland and what he had intended, a chasm of difference. I'm not proper, she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. He grunted, not looking up from his work. I'm not a proper woman, she said, more forcefully. He stopped. He looked at her. His eyes narrowed in the firelight. What's that mean? She pulled at the thread in her lap. My stepfather. The lie was easier to say now. Harland, he never kissed me. Not really. I don't think he intended to. She looked at him, her face a mask of shame and confusion. No one has, not ever. I don't think I know how to be a wife. I don't know how to be touched. Is something broken in me? Colt went rigid. His hand stopped moving. The piece of oiled leather fell from his lap to the floor. He stared into the fire, his jaw so tight she could see the muscle jump. A long, painful silence stretched out, filled only by the hiss of the flames. Finally, he spoke. His voice was a low growl, so quiet she almost didn't hear it. No, he didn't look at her. There's nothing broken in you, he said, his voice fierce. His gaze locked on the fire. Nothing at all. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath, waiting for his judgment. She let it out, and a small, broken sob came with it. She covered her face with her hands and cried, silently. She cried for her father's weakness, for Harlan's cruelty, and for the terrible, aching loneliness that had been her entire life. He did not move to comfort her. He just sat there, a silent, rigid guardian of her grief. That night, her sleep was broken. She did not dream of the chase, or the cold, or the belt. She dreamed of Colt. She was on the cot, the firelight low. He was standing over her, but he was not the gruff, silent man from the day. His eyes, in the dream, were soft. The gray turned to warm silver. He knelt beside the cot, and he did not grab her. He held out his hand, palm up, in the dream. She took it, his calloused fingers laced with hers. He leaned in. He kissed her forehead, a soft, warm press. He kissed her eyelids. He kissed the corner of her mouth, and then he kissed her lips. It was not a kiss of force or demand. It was a slow, gentle pressure, a question, and in the dream, her body answered, melting, opening, igniting. He began to unbutton her shirt, his knuckles brushing the sensitive skin of her collarbone, and Evelyn woke with a sharp, choked gasp. The cabin was dark. The fire was just a bed of red gold embers. Across the room, Colt was a shadow on the floor, rolled in his blankets, his breathing deep and even. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like a fist against her ribs. She was slick with sweat, and beneath the blankets, she was wet. There was a throbbing, liquid ache between her legs, a feeling she had never, ever known. It was pleasurable, and she was consumed with a shame so profound it made her sick. The next day, she could not look at him. She was a different person. She was quiet, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was a skittish, guilty silence. She kept to the cot, her back to him. She dropped the tin plate, and it clattered on the floor, making her jump. She burned the bread, her face hot when he wordlessly scraped the black crust off. He knew. He sensed the change. The easy, shared silence of the past days was gone, replaced by a taut, humming wire. He watched her, his face wary. "Snow's almost gone from the south ridge," he said, trying to break the tension. She just nodded, scrubbing a pot with a force that was wholly unnecessary. The day dragged on, the air in the cabin growing thicker with every hour. Night fell, and the small room seemed to shrink, closing in on them. He ate his stew standing by the fire. She ate hers on the cot. The silence was an accusation. She couldn't bear it. She couldn't bear her shame. She couldn't bear his distance. She had to know. She stood up. The rough wool of the trousers scratched her legs. He heard the movement and turned from the fire, his body tensing. She walked toward him. She felt small, exposed. He was so much taller than her. He was bigger than Harland. He was bigger than any man she had ever known. His size, which had once seemed a comfort, now seemed dangerous. She stopped, just out of his reach. Her hand was shaking. She lifted it. She didn't know what she was doing. She just needed to touch. To see if he was real. To see if she was real. Her fingers, trembling, brushed the back of his hand where it rested on the rough log of the mantel. His skin was hot, calloused. He flinched, a sharp intake of breath, but he did not pull away. "You're too big," she whispered, the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. They were the words she had almost said to Harland, words of terror. But now, they were something else. They were words of awe. But I'll take it. It was a clumsy, desperate, broken thing to say, a mix of her old fear and this new, terrifying yearning. Colt looked at her as if she had struck him. His face went pale beneath his beard. He was stunned. He took a hard, sudden step back, putting a foot of space between them. "Don't," he said. His voice choked. "Don't say that. Don't say that." He turned away from her. A violent, jerky motion. He ran a hand through his hair, his fingers gripping the strands. He looked like a man in a trap. "You don't know what you're saying," he bit out. "You don't know me. I know you're not him," she said, her voice gaining a small, desperate strength. "I know you're gentle." "Gentle?" He let out a laugh, but it was a bitter, broken sound. He turned to face her, and his eyes were not soft. They were tormented. "Evelyn," he said, and the use of her name, a name she had never told him, a name he must have heard in her fever dreams, hit her like a blow. "You don't understand. Years ago, back in Texas, I was a boy, 17, a stable boy, a rich man's wife. She liked to talk to me. She was lonely. Her husband, he found us talking. He didn't like it." His voice was rough, full of old pain. "He said I touched her. He said I forced her. He said I assaulted her." He spat the words out like they were poison. "I never laid a hand on her. I never did, but I was poor. And my blood, it wasn't pure to them. He was rich. He was white." He was pacing now, a caged animal in the small space. "The judge, he called me a danger to women. He branded me. I spent 3 years on a prison farm for a lie. 3 years of my life. Gone for a lie." He stopped, his chest heaving. He looked at her, and his soul was naked in his eyes. Raw. "When I got out, I swore," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I swore I'd never touch a woman again. Never. Not unless she begged me. Not unless she was so clear about it. So clear that no one, no judge, no God, could ever twist it into a lie." The silence in the cabin was absolute, broken only by the hiss of the fire and his ragged breathing. Evelyn looked at him, this quiet, gentle man who had saved her. This man who had been so brutalized by the same world that had sold her. Her dream. It hadn't been a sin. It had been an answer. She stepped toward him, closing the space he had made. He flinched, but he held his ground. She put her trembling hand on his chest. Through the thin wool of his shirt, she could feel his heart, hammering like a trapped bird. She looked up, meeting his anguished, terrified eyes. "Then let me beg." His name, Colt, fell from her lips as a question, as a prayer, as a statement of fact. She had said, "Then let me beg," and the words hung in the charged air, a vow spoken into the silence. He was frozen, a man trapped by his own history, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a desire so profound it was painful to witness. His hands, those scarred, capable hands, were balled into fists at his sides, as if fighting the urge to reach for her or to push her away. "Evelyn," he whispered, and her name sounded like a man breaking. "You don't know what you're asking. I am not what you think. I'm not safe." "You are the only safe thing I have ever known," she answered, her voice trembling but fierce. She had survived a monster's house. This man's torment did not frighten her. She stepped closer, her hand still on his chest. His heart was a wild thing against her palm. You said you would not touch me unless I was clear." She took his right hand, the one balled into a fist, and slowly, gently, uncurled his fingers with her own. She placed his palm flat against her cheek. The contact was a thunderclap. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, and his entire body went rigid. His skin was rough, hot, and he was shaking. Or perhaps she was. "Is this clear?" she whispered. His eyes closed for a second. A flicker of profound pain, or perhaps profound relief. "God help me," he breathed. He did not kiss her. He did not grab her. He simply stood there, letting her hold his hand to her face, a statue learning to feel again. She led him, a step at a time, from the fire to the cot. It was the most terrifying, powerful walk of her life. She was the one in control. She was the one who sat, pulling him down to sit beside her on the narrow, creaking mattress. "They were lies," she said, her voice low. "What they said about you, it was a lie. I know it was." He looked at her, and the dam of his control, the wall he had built for years, crumbled. A single tear escaped, tracking a clean path through the grime on his cheek. He did not wipe it away. She leaned in, slow as a sunrise, and touched her lips to that wet track on his skin. It was a kiss of salt, of soot, of old sorrows. He shuddered, a full-body tremor, and his hand, the one at her cheek, finally moved. His fingers threaded into her hair, his touch so light it was barely there, as if he were holding a butterfly he was afraid to crush. "Evelyn," he said again, his voice cracking. "Show me," she whispered against his skin. "Please, show me what it is. Not what he wanted." He guided her back against the rough wool blankets. He hovered over her, his weight braced on his elbows, his body a shield against the cold, against the world, against everything but himself. He was so big, he blotted out the light from the fire, and she was enveloped in his shadow, in his scent of pine and smoke. "If I hurt you," he choked out, his voice raw. If you feel fear, you tell me, you scream, you hit me. You understand?" "I am not afraid of you, Colt," she said, her voice clear. He looked into her eyes, a long, searching gaze, and then he lowered his head. His first kiss was not on her mouth, it was on her forehead, a long, pressing, reverent kiss that felt like a blessing. He kissed her eyelids, her temple, the line of her jaw. He was mapping her, learning her in the dark. When his lips finally found hers, it was tentative, a soft brush, a question. She answered by parting her lips, a small, shy invitation. The kiss deepened, and it was nothing like her dream. It was real. It was clumsy and wet and desperate and achingly tender. It was the first true thing that had ever happened to her. He moved slowly, his hands learning the shape of her body through the rough wool of his shirt. He stopped at every button, his eyes asking for permission. She nodded, her throat tight. He stopped when his hand brushed the bare skin of her collarbone, his fingers shaking. He said, pulling back, his breath ragged. This is your last chance to say no. My only chance, she whispered, is to say yes. Their union was an unmaking. It was an avalanche of sensation, overwhelming and raw. It was not the simple, procedural act her mother had hinted at, nor the violent, degrading act Harland had promised with his coiled belt. It was emotional. It was an exorcism. He was clumsy, terrified of his own strength, his past a visible ghost in the room. He stopped, over and over, his body trembling with the effort of his restraint. Am I hurting you? Is this all right? She was crying, not in a small, polite way, but in great, gulping sobs that tore from her chest. He recoiled, pulling away instantly, his face a mask of panic and self-loathing. I hurt you. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. No! She cried, grabbing his arms, his strong, corded arms. No, Colt, no! She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak, but she pulled him back, her fingers digging into his skin. It's not pain. It's relief. I'm empty. You're filling me. Oh, God, Colt. It was the relief of a wound finally being cleaned. It was the release of 18 years of fear, of shame, of being a bartered good, of being small and silent and powerless. In his arms, in his terrifying, gentle care. She was being unbroken. She was being made whole. He looked at her, saw the truth in her tear-streaked face, and the last of his fear broke. He held her, kissing her hair, her face, her shoulders, whispering her name like a litany, and their bodies finally found a rhythm, a desperate, healing rhythm in the deep, cold quiet of the mountain cabin. In the days that followed, the cabin changed. The air, once thick with unspoken tension, was now light. It was filled with a new, fragile intimacy. Evelyn woke the next morning tangled in his arms, his heavy wool blanket thrown over them both. He was already awake, watching her, his gray eyes clear and quiet. A dark, dull red crept up his neck when he saw her looking. He did not pull away. She smiled, a small, tentative smile. And then she laughed. It was a strange, rusty sound, like a piece of machinery that had not been used in years. She laughed at the absurdity of it. Here she was, a runaway bride, snowed in with a branded outcast, and she had never felt so safe. His own lips quirked. What's so funny? I don't know, she said, and her laugh grew, a bubble of pure, unadulterated joy. I don't know at all. He began to teach her. The world was still a dangerous place, and he knew he could not keep her in this cabin forever. He needed her to be strong, not just in spirit, but in body. You need to know how to use this, he said one bright, cold afternoon, pressing his rifle into her hands. It was heavy. She staggered under the weight of the oiled steel and dark wood. I've never held a gun. I know, he said. He stood behind her, his chest a warm wall against her back. He put his arms around her, his hands covering hers, showing her how to hold it, how to brace the stock against her shoulder. Don't be afraid of it. It's a tool, like a hammer or a knife. You just have to respect it. He set a tin can on a distant stump. Line up the sight, breathe out, and squeeze. Don't pull. She flinched at the explosion, the buck and the roar of it, but the can flew from the stump. A clean hit. She turned, her eyes wide with shock and a new, fierce pride. He was watching her, not the can. Good, he said, his voice soft. You're a natural. He taught her how to gut the rabbits from his snares. The first time. She had turned away, her stomach churning. He did not coddle her. He simply continued, his hands moving with a swift, practical economy, talking her through it. Waste nothing. The wilderness doesn't forgive waste. The next day, she did it herself. her hands shaking, her teeth clenched, but she did it. She was a preacher's daughter who knew how to skin her own supper. He taught her to read the sky. "See those clouds?" he'd say, his arm pointing, his hand brushing her shoulder. "They look like a mare's tail. Wind's coming. Hard wind." He taught her to read the snow, to see the tracks of the fox, the deer, the bear. He was giving her his world, piece by piece. Their bond was built in the small moments. It was in the shared cup of coffee in the cold, pre-dawn dark. It was in the way he'd pass her the last piece of bread, and the way she'd break it, giving him the larger half. It was in the stolen glances. She would watch his hands as he carved a piece of wood into a spoon. He would watch her as she brushed her hair by the fire, the long, dark strands crackling in the dry air. It was in the sudden, quiet kisses. He'd be leaving to check the traps, and he'd pause, his hand on her cheek, and press his lips to her temple. She grew bold. One afternoon, as he was grumbling over a torn harness, she walked up to him, grabbed his shirt, pulled him down, and kissed him. Hard. He froze, stunned. Then his arms wrapped around her, lifting her off the floor, his kiss answering hers with a hunger that left her breathless. He even teased her. He had a dry, quiet wit that he kept hidden. She dropped a tin plate, and it clattered loudly. "Trying to scare off every bear on the mountain?" he'd rumbled. "I was just testing the floor," she'd retorted. And his rare, quiet laugh was her reward. But beneath the laughter, the fear still lingered. The cabin was a bubble of warmth, but the world outside was still cold, and it was still waiting. Every time the wind howled, she would jump, her eyes flying to the door. And he, in turn, slept lightly, his rifle never more than an arm's length away. They knew they couldn't hide forever. The melt came faster than he'd expected. The south-facing slopes were bare, and the pass, while still treacherous, was no longer impassable. One afternoon, Colt rode out, rifle in hand. "Hunting," he'd said. "Need meat. The snares are empty. The deer are moving low." She watched him go, a knot of fear in her stomach. He had been gone for hours, longer than usual. The sun was beginning to dip, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of orange and blood red. When she finally saw him, he was riding quiet hard, and the horse was lathered. He did not stop at the lean-to. He rode straight to the cabin, swinging down before the horse had even stopped. He burst through the door, and he was not the man who had left that morning. The gentle teacher, the tender lover, was gone. In his place was the man who had been branded, the outcast, the survivor. His eyes were hard, and his face was a mask of cold fury. "What is it?" she said, her hands flying to her throat. "Pack," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He was already moving, grabbing his bedroll, checking his ammunition. "Colt, you're frightening me." "What happened?" He stopped. He looked at her. "I went low, down toward the valley. There were men, 3 of them, at the old miners' camp." "Men?" "Riders, asking questions, asking about a woman, a girl who ran from her wedding, in a white dress." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. She stumbled back, grabbing the table for support. They know. They know you came this way. They found a scrap of lace from your dress. They're offering a reward. Harlan Riggs is offering a reward for his stepdaughter." He spat the word. He looked at her. His eyes narrowed, the truce of her lie suddenly sharp between them. The lie crumbled. She couldn't keep it. Not now. He deserved the truth. He deserved to know what he was risking. "He's not my stepfather," she whispered, her voice shaking so hard she could barely form the words. Colt stopped, his hands full of cartridges. He did not look surprised. He just looked weary. "No," he said. "I didn't figure he was... That was my wedding day. Colt, that ceremony. It was real. My father, he had debts, gambling debts. He sold me to Harlan. Harlan Riggs is my legal husband." The confession hung in the air, ugly and sharp. For a long moment, Colt did not move. He just stared at her, the full, devastating weight of her words settling on him. Then, With a low, animalistic roar, he swept his arm across the table. The tin plates, the coffee pot, the spoon she had carved, all of it went crashing to the floor. He did not rage at her. He raged at the world. He hit the wall, the solid log wall, with his fist. The sound was a dull, wet thud. "A husband," he bit out, the words ripped from his throat. "A legal husband." He turned to her, his eyes blazing, not with anger at her, but with a terrible, protective fury. "Do you know what this means? Evelyn, do you? You're his property. That's what the law says. You are a piece of property, like his horse or his house." He paced the small cabin. "A lion in a cage. They won't call what I did rescue. They won't call this sanctuary. They'll call it kidnapping. They'll call it worse. Abduction. Rape. They will hang me. Evelyn, they will hang me. And they will give you right back to him." She was crying now, the tears she had held back finally coming. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I should have told you. I'll go. I'll turn myself in. I won't let them hurt you." He crossed the room in a single stride, grabbing her by the shoulders. His grip was hard, bruising, but it was not cruel. It was desperate. "You will do no such thing," he growled. "Do you hear me? You are not his. You are not your father's. You are not going back to him." "But they'll kill you. Let them try," he said, his voice a low, deadly promise. "I'd kill him before I let him put his hands on you again. I'd kill them all." He released her, his hands gentling, his thumbs rubbing her shoulders. He was thinking, his mind working. "We run," he said, his voice flat and certain. "Run? Where?" "North, into the territories. It's wilder up there. The law is thin. A man can get lost. A woman can find a new life. There are traveling ministers, men who can grant an annulment, if we pay them enough, if we find the right one. It's a chance. It's the only one we have." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We leave. Tonight. Before they pick up our trail." That night, the cabin felt different. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a tomb they were escaping. The fear of the future was a palpable thing. A third person in the room with them. Cold and sharp. They packed in silence. Food, ammunition, the blankets, his knife. There was no talk. There was only the sound of their hurried movements, the knowledge that just a few miles down the mountain, men were hunting her. When they were done, he looked at her. Her face was pale in the firelight, her eyes wide with fear. But she was not broken. She was steady. He reached for her, his hand cupping her jaw. The future was a dark, cold, unknown. They might not survive the run. They might be caught by morning. This might be the last moment of peace they ever knew. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. She offered herself to him, her body a silent question. This time, it was not the tentative exploration of their first night. This time, it was not the gentle, teasing intimacy of the past weeks. It was desperate. It was heated. It was a claiming. They came together with an urgency that bordered on violence, a raw, primal need to affirm this connection, this life, before the world tried to tear it from them. It was a fight. It was a prayer. They were taking each other with a desperate, fearful, all-consuming need. Later, as they lay tangled in the blankets, the fire burned down to embers, listening to the wind howl outside. She whispered into the darkness, her lips against his chest. "I never knew," she said, her voice quiet and awed. "I never knew love could feel like survival." The cabin was a cold, empty shell in the gray light of dawn. The fire was dead. The embers were gray dust. They moved in the small space with a grim, silent efficiency. Their brief, shared life packed into 2 bedrolls and a single saddlebag. Colt was a different man. The tenderness of the night was gone, replaced by a hard, watchful vigilance. He was a hunter again. Only now, they were the prey. He doused the last of the fire with snow, not for safety, but to erase their presence. "Stay off the path," he said, his voice low. "Walk where I walk. Don't break branches. Don't leave a sign." He led her out, not through the easy pass, but up, over a high, treacherous ridge, a place where no one would expect them to go. The snow was still deep, but it was crusted and slick, the melt having frozen overnight. He moved with a speed and silence that she found hard to match. But she did. Evelyn did not complain. She did not stumble. Her fear was a cold, hard stone in her belly, but she channeled it. She put her bandaged feet exactly where he put his boots. She clutched the rifle he had given her, its weight a strange, solid comfort. When he offered her a hand over a steep bank of ice, her grip was firm. He looked at her, a quick, appraising glance. He saw the set of her jaw, the determination in her eyes, the absence of the terrified girl he had found. He saw a woman. He nodded, a small, curt gesture of approval, and they moved on. They traveled for 3 days, moving north, evading the trails, eating cold hardtack and dried meat from his pack. They spoke little. Every sound was a threat. Every distant crack of a branch made them freeze. Colt was reading the land, his eyes constantly scanning, looking for the telltale signs of riders, for the smoke of a campfire. On the 3rd evening, they crested a ridge and looked down into a small, squalid hollow. It was not a town. It was a lonely outpost, a collection of 3 sod-roofed cabins and a ramshackle building that called itself a trading post, all clustered around a muddy, fouled spring. A sign, hanging by one hinge, read, "Gentry's." "We stop here," Colt said, pulling quiet into a small grove of skeletal aspen. "Wait, stop. They'll see us. We need a document, more than we need food." He looked at her, his face grim. "A lie on paper is the only thing that might save us. A traveling notary stops here, 3rd week of the month, sells forged papers, land claims, brands. I've heard the talk. We're lucky, or we're not." He left her with the horse, his rifle in hand, and melted into the twilight shadows of the outpost. Evelyn waited, her heart a drum against her ribs. Every shout, every laugh from the trading post, sent a jolt of panic through her. She clutched the rifle, her shoulder aching from where she'd fired it, and she prayed. He returned an hour later. He did not look pleased. "He's here. A man named Silas Croft. He's drunk and he's greedy." "What does he want?" $50. Gold." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "We don't have that. We have nothing." "I have my pelts," Colt said. He had a small, prized bundle in his pack, beaver and fox, saved for a good trade. "It's not enough. He wants the horse." "Quiet," she whispered. To give up the horse was to give up their legs, their speed. "He wants the horse," Colt repeated, his jaw tight. "I told him no. He said $40. And the rifle?" Evelyn looked at the rifle in her hands, the tool he had taught her to use, their only real defense. "He knows we're desperate," Colt said, his voice flat. "No," Evelyn said. She stood up, her mind suddenly, frighteningly clear. "He doesn't want the rifle. He's a man. He wants something else. Give me the pelts, and the $30 you have." "Evelyn, no. You're not going in there." "You are a threat to him," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're a man with a gun, and you look like you'll use it. He thinks he can bleed you, but me, I am just a girl who needs help." She took the money and the pelts. She walked out of the trees, into the muddy clearing, and toward the trading post. Her legs were shaking, but she did not falter. The inside was thick with smoke, the smell of whiskey, and unwashed men. They stopped talking when she entered, their eyes raking over her man's trousers and the torn wool shirt. She ignored them. She saw him, a small, rat-like man in a dirty suit, sitting at a corner table with a bottle and a stack of papers. She walked to his table. "Mr. Croft?" He looked up, his eyes bleary but sharp. "What is it, girl?" She put the pelts on the table. She put the $30, 2 gold coins and a stack of silver, on top of them. "I need a paper," she said, her voice low and steady. not pleading, but stating a fact. I need a document, notarized and stamped, saying I was never married, saying my name is Evelyn Hayes, from Missouri, and that I am of age, and free to travel. He looked at the money. He looked at the pelts. He looked at her. This is $30. I told the big man 50. The big man was mistaken, Evelyn said, her voice dropping. He was angry. I am not. This is a gift for your time. My stepfather, he is a cruel man. He is hunting me. I need to get north, to my aunt in the territories. This paper will keep me safe on the road. She used her lie, the one she had first told Colt, and it felt like a weapon. Croft smiled, a slow, unpleasant baring of yellow teeth. A cruel stepfather. Yes, I've written many such papers, but $50 is the price for such cruelty. Evelyn leaned in. She did not smile. And I am telling you, sir, that this is all the money we have, and that if you do not help me, my protector, who is outside, and who is a very jealous man, will be most displeased. He is not a man you want displeased. He was branded in Texas for his temper. She used Colt's pain, his past, and she hated herself for it. But she saw the flicker of fear in Croft's eyes. A branded man. A dangerous man. Croft looked at the money. He looked at the door. He looked at her. He licked his lips. It's a very difficult forgery. The county seal, very complex. I am sure you are a master of your craft, she whispered. He sighed. He swept the money and the pelts into his bag. Come back in 1 hour, and tell your protector to stay clear of my business. They rode out of Gentry's an hour later, Evelyn holding the reins, Colt riding behind her on quiet. They had the paper. A crisp, official-looking lie, tucked inside Colt's shirt, warm against his skin. He had not said a word about what she had done. But as he'd mounted the horse behind her, his hand had rested on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. They rode for 2 more days, pushing north, the land growing wilder, flatter, the mountains giving way to high plains and cold, dark lakes. They camped one night by the shore of one such lake, the water black and still as glass, the sky so full of stars it looked solid. They had been lucky. No sign of riders. The forged paper felt like a shield. They sat by the small, smokeless fire, the silence between them heavy, but no longer tense. It was the silence of 2 people who had passed through an ordeal and survived. Evelyn was the one to break it. She was looking into the fire, her face shadowed. My father, she said, her voice so quiet he had to lean in. He wasn't a bad man, not at first. He was just weak. He loved the cards. He loved the feel of them in his hands more than he loved the word of God, more than he loved my mother, more than he loved me. Colt was still listening. He started with small debts, $1, $5. Then he lost the mule. Then he signed a paper, a mortgage on the church, 2 Harland rigs. He thought he could win it back. He always thought he could win it back. She picked up a small stick and pushed it into the embers, watching it glow red. The night before the wedding, I heard them, Harland, in our parlor. He wasn't shouting. He was quiet. He said, Preacher, the debt is due. I own this house. I own your church. I own you. And my father wept. He begged, and Harland laughed. He said, There is one other thing you have, one thing of value, her purity. Tears were tracking silently down her face, catching the firelight. He didn't just sell me for his debt, Colt. He sold me to save his own skin. He sold me, his daughter, her purity, so he could keep his house. He walked me to that church the next day, and he handed me over. She was crying now, the stick forgotten, her hands covering her face. She was making a low, wounded sound, the sound of a faith betrayed, a childhood shattered. Colt moved, shifting from his side of the fire to hers. He did not touch her, not at first. He just sat beside her, his presence a solid, warm wall. He waited until her sobs quieted. He handed her his neckerchief. It was rough, and it smelled of him. She wiped her face. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said, his voice rough. He looked out over the black water of the lake. You think you're the only one with a past that's got teeth." He was quiet for a long time. She thought he was done. "The prison farm," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It wasn't the work that broke you. It was nothing, the gray. Every day, the same. The guards, the things they did, the things they let other men do. You stopped being a person. You're just an animal, a thing. You forget what the sun feels like, even when it's on you." He picked up a stone and turned it over and over in his scarred hands. "I got out. After 3 years, I walked for a week. I had nothing, no name, no money, no self. I was just the thing they said I was, a danger, a brute." He stopped. His hand was clenched so tight around the rock his knuckles were white. "I got to a river, wide and fast, spring melt. I sat there for a whole day, and I thought, what's the use? I'm branded. I'll never be clean. I'll never be anything. It would be so easy to just stop, to let the water take it, all of it." Evelyn stopped breathing. She looked at his profile, so stark and harsh against the stars. I walked into the water," he whispered. It was so cold. It felt good, like it was burning the filth off me. I took a step, and another, and then I tried. I just let go." She made a small, broken sound, and her hand found his, the one not holding the rock. She laced her fingers with his. He turned his head, his eyes dark in the shadows, finding hers. "I don't know why I fought. Something in me. I grabbed a root. I pulled myself out. I lay on that bank for a day and a night, shaking, and I swore I'd never go near people again. I'd never let them have that much power, to make me want to stop. I came west, to be alone. I figured I'd find peace, or I'd find death. Didn't much matter which one came first." They looked at each other. Two broken, lost souls, reflected in the dark. She did not know who moved first. They were just together. She was in his lap, her face buried in his neck, and he was holding her, his arms wrapped around her like he was the one drowning, and she was the only solid thing in the world. They cried. They cried for her father's weakness and his own. They cried for the years he lost, and the innocence she never had. They cried for the cruelty of men like Harland, and the weakness of men like her father. It was a silent, shared, shoulder-shaking grief, a purging of all the poison they had held inside. That night, they did not make love. They rolled their 2 bedrolls into one. He held her, his front to her back, his arm draped over her waist, his hand resting on her stomach. She held his hand, her fingers laced with his. They just held each other. The silence in the tent was heavier, more sacred than any words, any vows, any prayer. It was the silence of 2 people who had shown each other their deepest, ugliest scars, and had not looked away. They were on the trail for another 4 days. The land was changing. They were in the open, a rolling high plains that offered no cover. The shared confessions by the lake had forged a new bond. They were a single unit. They moved as one. The ambush came on a bright, cold morning. They were riding through a shallow arroyo. The banks high on either side. It was a trap. Colt knew it a second before it happened. He reined quiet in, his hand flying to his rifle. "Get down!" he hissed. A shot cracked the silence. A bullet chipped the rock just above Evelyn's head. "Harland Riggs sends his regards," a voice boomed from the ridge. 3 men, 2 on the ridge above, 1 blocking the arroyo ahead. "Harland's men, stay with the horse," Colt roared. He slid from the saddle, his rifle in his hand. He was not a man. He was a force. He was the branded outcast, the cornered wolf. He fired 1, 2, 3 times, pinning the men on the ridge. The man in the pass spurred his horse, charging. Colt met him. He didn't have time to reload. He used the rifle as a club. A brutal, swinging blow that knocked the man from his saddle. The man landed, rolled, and came up with a knife. Colt dropped his rifle and pulled his own. It was not a fight. It was a butchering. It was bloody. It was brutal. Colt moved with a speed and a violence that terrified Evelyn. He was not the gentleman who held her. He was the man who had survived a prison farm. He lunged, a flurry of steel, and the fight was over in a second. The man on the ground did not get up. A shot rang out from the ridge. Colt cried out, a sharp, pained sound. He stumbled, grabbing his shoulder. The two men on the ridge were taking aim. Confident, a wounded man, a horse, and a woman. Evelyn saw it. She saw Colt stumble. She saw the blood. She saw the men reloading, laughing. And the preacher's daughter was gone. She grabbed the second rifle, the one from the man Colt had felled. She remembered. Brace the stock. Breathe out. Squeeze. She did not aim for the men. She aimed for the rock just beside them. The rifle exploded in her hands. The kick a brutal, painful shove. The shot was wild, but it was loud. It ricocheted, screaming, off the rock wall, showering the men with stone chips. They cried out, ducking, confused. A woman? Shooting! Get on the horse! Colt roared, clutching his arm, blood pouring through his fingers. He scrambled for his rifle. He fired again at the ridge, and the men scattered. He grabbed the reins of quiet, threw himself into the saddle, and reached down for Evelyn. He hauled her up, in front of him, and he spurred the horse. They galloped, hard, down the arroyo, past the dead man, as two more shots kicked up the dust behind them. They rode for an hour. They rode until Quiet was stumbling, his coat thick with foam. They rode until the arroyo was a distant memory. Colt was swaying in the saddle, his weight heavy against her back. "Stop," he gasped. "Here, in the pines." He slid off the horse, and he did not land on his feet. He collapsed. He tried to get up, and fell back. "Colt!" she screamed. She was off the horse in a second, at his side. The whole left side of his shirt was black with blood. They're still... "Coming!" he panted, his face pale, slick with sweat. "Evelyn, you have to run. Take the horse, take the paper, go north. Don't let them find you." "Shut up," she said, her voice a fierce, trembling sob. "You are not dying here." She ripped his shirt open. The wound was high on his shoulder, a ragged, ugly hole. The bullet was still in there. She ran to the saddlebags. His kit. He had a small flask of whiskey, a needle, a spool of thick thread. She knelt beside him. She uncorked the whiskey. "Bite on this," she said, shoving his neckerchief into his mouth, "and drink." She poured half the remaining whiskey over the wound. He roared, a muffled, agonized sound. "Good," she whispered, her hands shaking so hard she could barely thread the needle. "Now stay awake. You are not leaving me. I will not be alone again. Do you hear me?" She poured the last of the whiskey over the needle, and she began to stitch him up. It was a crude, terrible job, her stitches large and uneven. He was a living man, and she was sewing his flesh. He writhed, his body bucking, his eyes wide with an agony she could barely stand to watch. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears blinding her. "I'm so sorry. Just hold on, hold on." When she was done, she wrapped him in strips torn from her own shirt. He was limp, his breathing shallow. The fever was already setting in. He looked at her, his eyes glassy, unfocused. So stupid," he slurred. "Should have left me. I'm not worthy. I'm branded. Am just trouble." He was in a delirium, his deepest fears bubbling to the surface. She leaned down, her face close to his, her bloody hands framing his face. "You are not trouble," she whispered, her voice fierce. "You are my savior. You are my home." She kissed him, a hard, desperate, proprietary kiss. She kissed his sweat-drenched forehead, his pale lips. "You are not worthy?" she whispered, her lips against his. Then I'll carry both our worth. I'll carry it until you believe it. The horse was half dead. Colt was worse. He was slumped forward, tied to the saddle, a dead weight that Evelyn had to haul upright every time he slid. She was walking, leading quiet through a barren, high-country plain, her own feet raw, her body hollow with exhaustion. The men who had chased them were gone, but they were not safe. Colt was burning with fever. The stitches she had put in his shoulder were raw and weeping. He was dying, and she was walking him to his grave. She did not know how long they had been walking. 2 days, maybe 3. Time was a blur of dust, wind, and Colt's low, delirious moans. On the 3rd day, she saw it. It was not a town. It was a cluster of buildings in a shallow, green valley. They were not log cabins, but sturdy, framed houses painted white. There were barns, and they were red. The fences were mended. There was an air of peace and order. She stumbled toward it, half dragging the horse. A man came out to meet her. He was tall, dressed in plain, gray clothes, with a broad-brimmed hat. He carried no gun. His face, lined with age, was calm. "Please," Evelyn gasped, the first word she had spoken in a day. "He's hurt. He was shot. I think he's dying." The man looked at the bleeding, unconscious man in the saddle. He looked at the exhausted, blood-streaked woman holding the reins. He did not ask who, or why, or where. He simply nodded, his face kind. "They must bring him inside. We have a place. Ruth will see to him." The man, who they would come to know as Obadiah, helped her get Colt off the horse. Another man came, silent and efficient, and took quiet, leading him to a barn, his movements gentle. They were in a Quaker settlement, a place of peace in the middle of a brutal, unforgiving land. Colt was laid in a clean, soft bed, a real bed, with linens that smelled of lye soap and sunshine. A woman named Ruth, Obadiah's wife, came with a basin of hot water, carbolic and clean bandages. She was a small, stern-looking woman, but her hands were impossibly gentle. She clucked her tongue as she cut away Evelyn's crude, bloody stitches. "Thee has a strong hand, child," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "But a heavy one. He's fortunate thee stopped the bleeding. Thee saved his life." Evelyn, her task done, her adrenaline gone, sank to the floor, put her head on her knees, and fell into a sleep so deep it was like a small death. They stayed for a week. It was a strange, quiet time. Colt drifted in and out of a deep, healing fever. Evelyn was given a small, clean room, a simple gray dress, and a place in the community kitchens. She worked. She had to. The stillness, the peace, was unsettling. She kneaded bread with the quiet, plain-dressed women. She scrubbed floors. She mended linens, the simple, repetitive. Domestic tasks were a balm. They grounded her. Here, no one shouted, no one demanded. The women spoke in thee and thou, their voices low, their movements efficient. They did not ask her about her past, or the torn, bloodied trousers she had arrived in. They simply made a space for her. Colt, when his fever finally broke, was weak, but his eyes were clear. The first thing he saw was Evelyn, asleep in a chair by his bed. He reached out, his hand shaking, and touched her hair. She woke instantly. "Colt, you stayed," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "I told you," she whispered back, her fingers lacing with his. "I'm saving you." As he gained strength, he could not be idle. He was a man built for work. His shoulder was still bound, but he could walk. Obadiah found him in the barn, staring at the horses. "Thee knows horses?" Obadiah asked. Colt nodded. He was a man of few words, and these people, he found, did not demand them. He was given the stables. He mended harnesses, his good hand quick and sure. He brushed the mares, his touch gentle, his voice a low, soothing rumble. He, the branded outcast, the killer, the man who had survived a prison farm, found a strange, unwelcome peace in this quiet valley. But the world was still out there. The rumors arrived with a supply wagon from the south. Evelyn was in the kitchens, shelling peas, when she heard the driver talking to Obadiah. "Whole territory's papered with it," the driver said. "A warrant for some branded half-breed named Colt. Seems he abducted the new wife of Harland Riggs, snatched her right from her wedding bed. They say Riggs is offering $500, gold, for the man's head, and the return of his property." The bowl of peas slipped from Evelyn's hands, scattering across the clean, scrubbed floor. She ran to the barn, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. Colt was there, in the dim light, grooming the gray mare. "They're coming," she said, breathless. "There's a warrant, $500, for you, and for me, his property." The currycomb stopped. Colt's back went rigid. He turned, slowly. The peace of the last week was gone. His eyes were hard again. He was the man from the arroyo, the hunted. "I knew it," he said, his voice flat. "That night, he came to her small room. He did not touch her. He stood by the door, a shadow in the moonlight. 'Evelyn,' he said, his voice rough. 'I'm leaving. Tonight.' 'Leaving? We are leaving,' she said, already moving to get her boots. 'No,' he said it so flatly. It stopped her. 'Just me. I'm going to turn myself in.' She stared at him, uncomprehending. 'What? No?' 'Listen to me,' he said, his voice urgent, full of the old pain. 'I brought this on you. I'm what they say I am. I'm trouble. I'm branded. They will always hunt me. But you can be safe. If I turn myself in, they'll have their man. You can tell them I forced you. Tell them I hurt you. They will believe it. They want to believe it. Riggs will take you back, but you'll be alive. You'll be safe.' He was offering his life, his neck, for her. He was ready to die to give her the very life she had run from. She crossed the small room in 2 strides and struck him. Her hand, hard from work, cracked across his face. He did not flinch. He just looked at her, his eyes full of a terrible, broken acceptance. "You fool," she whispered, her voice trembling with a fury that was deeper than any fear. "You stupid, noble fool. Do you know nothing? Do you think I am safer with him? Do you think my life is worth saving if it is with him? The belt, Colt, the handcuffs, that is what you are saving me for." She was crying now, angry tears. "I will not let you. I will not let you die for me. I will not go back." "Then what, he cried, his own control breaking. "We run? They will find us. They will hang me and they will drag you back. There is no out for people like us." "No," she said, grabbing his shirt. "No more running. We fight, not with guns. We fight with the law. We use their rules." She did not know what she was saying, but the words felt right. She would not be property. She went to Obadiah and Ruth. She told them everything. Not the lie about her stepfather, the full, ugly, brutal truth, the gambling debt, the sale, the words, her purity for my house, the belt, the window, the escape. The 2 Quakers listened, their faces still. They were abolitionists. They had run stations on the Underground Railroad. They knew the language of slavery. "Thee art not his property, child," Ruth said, her voice like iron. "No human is property, but the law of men is a dark and tangled thing." "Is there no law for me?" Evelyn pleaded. "Is there no law for women? The law is written by men like Harland Riggs," Obadiah said grimly. "But there are loopholes. You say the marriage was not completed?" Evelyn blushed, a hot wave of shame. "No, I ran before he could consent," Ruth said, nodding. "A marriage requires consent. A sale is not consent. And there is the matter of the traveling judge." Hope, a thin, sharp needle, pierced Evelyn's fear. "A judge. Judge Elias Thorne," Obadiah said. "He rides the circuit. He is a hard man, but a just one. He respects our people. He is due here by the end of the week. He is, perhaps, your only hope. Thee must plead thy case to him." Judge Thorne arrived 4 days later, flanked by 2 armed territorial marshals. He was a tall man, bearded, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was here to settle land disputes and sentence a horse thief. Obadiah requested a private meeting. He brought Evelyn. Colt was told to wait in the barn, a silent, grim prisoner of his own hope, in Obadiah's simple parlor. Evelyn told her story. Again, she told it to the judge, her voice shaking, but her words clear. She told him about the debt, the belt, the escape. She told him about Colt finding her. She even, her face burning, showed him the forged paper. I was so afraid. Sir, I had this made. I just wanted to be free. Judge Thorne looked at the paper. He looked at her. He looked at Obadiah. Obadiah, you vouch for this woman. I vouch for her truthfulness. Judge, and I vouch for the man. Colt, he has been here for 2 weeks. He is a worker, not a savage. He is gentle with the animals. He is a good man, despite his wound. The judge sighed, steepling his fingers. This is a damnable situation. A warrant is a warrant. Harland Riggs is a powerful man, and he has a legal marriage certificate. I have seen it. I will not, simply ignore the law. Then let me speak, Evelyn said, her voice rising. Publicly, let Harland face me. Let him hear my truth, in front of everyone. The judge looked at her, surprised. This was not a weeping, hysterical victim. This was a fighter. He considered it. It was highly irregular, but the situation was irregular. Very well, child, he said, a grim, small smile on his face. A public testimony. I will hear it, but be warned. If I find thee, or your protector, have lied to me in any way, I will honor that warrant. I will see him hang, and I will return you to your legal husband myself. Do you understand? I understand, Evelyn said, her back straight. I will testify. The meeting hall was packed. Word had spread. This was better than a horse thief trial. This was a spectacle. The hall was hot, dusty, the air thick with the smell of sweat, tobacco, and anticipation. Quakers, in their plain, neat clothes, sat on one side. Rough ranchers, trappers, and townsfolk, drawn by the rumor of a $500 bounty, filled the other. Colt was there. He stood at the back, flanked by one of the marshals. His hands were not bound, a small concession the judge had made. But he was a prisoner. He was pale, his shoulders stiff beneath a borrowed shirt. His eyes were only for Evelyn. They were filled with a desperate, agonizing love. Then Harland Riggs arrived. He burst through the doors, flanked by 3 of his hired men, the 2 who had survived the arroyo, and another. He was dressed in his town best, a dark suit, but his face was purple with rage. Judge Thorne, he boomed, stalking down the aisle. What is the meaning of this charade? This is a mockery. That woman is my wife. She was stolen, seduced by that criminal savage. He pointed a thick finger at Colt. A branded man, a danger to women. I have a warrant. You will be silent, Mr. Riggs. Judge Thorne's voice cut through the air like a whip. Or I will have you gagged and bound. This is my hall. You will have your say. And so, will she? He nodded to Evelyn. Evelyn Riggs, or Evelyn Hayes. Step forward. Evelyn walked to the front of the hall. She was trembling so hard she could barely feel her feet. She was wearing the simple gray dress. She looked, in the face of Harland's rage, like a small, gray bird. Mr. Riggs claims you are his legal wife, and that this man, Colt, abducted you by force, Harland shouted. He filled her head with lies. He forced her. Look at her. She's terrified of him. Silence, the judge roared. He turned his cool, assessing gaze on Evelyn. Speak, child, and speak the truth, the whole truth. God will know, and so will I. Evelyn's eyes found Colt's. He was watching her, his face a mask of torment, believing he had doomed her. She saw his pain, his fear for her. And in that moment, Her own fear died. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for him. She locked her eyes with his, and she drew a breath. "My name is Evelyn," she said. Her voice was small, but it was clear, and it carried in the dead silence. "And I am not his wife." "Liar!" Harlan screamed. The marshal stepped toward him. I was at a church," Evelyn continued, her voice gaining strength, her gaze fixed on Colt. "But it was not a marriage. It was a sale." She told them everything. "My father, he had a gambling debt to Mr. Riggs." A low murmur went through the crowd. He sold me. He sold my purity to pay his debt and keep his house." The murmur grew. The women in the hall were staring at Harlan now, their faces masks of open, cold disgust. "That night, my wedding night, he took me to his house. He locked the door." Her voice broke, just for a second, but she willed it steady. He showed me the belt he was going to use, and the handcuffs in the nightstand drawer." A woman in the back gasped, a sharp, horrified sound. "He did not want a wife, Judge. He wanted a thing to break. I broke the window. I ran for my life. I ran in my wedding dress, barefoot. I ran until I collapsed in the mountains, in the snow. I was dying." She tore her gaze from Colt and looked, for the first time, at Harlan. He was staring at her, his mouth open, his mask of righteous anger replaced by a look of sheer, stunned fury that she would dare. "This man," she said, and she pointed, not at Harlan, but at Colt. "This criminal savage, he did not abduct me. He found me. He saved my life. He tended my wounds. He fed me. He kept me safe. He never hurt me. He is the only man in my entire life who has ever treated me like a person, not like property." She turned back to the judge, her face wet with tears, but her spine rigid. "I ran from him." She pointed to Harlan. "I ran to him." She gestured to Colt. "That was my choice. I will not go back. If that is a crime, then I am guilty. But I am not his wife." The hall was utterly, completely silent. Judge Thorne stared at Evelyn for a long, long moment. He looked at Harlan, who was sweating, his arrogance crumbling, his power in this room gone. He looked at the faces of the ranchers, the trappers. He looked at Obadiah. He stood up. "Mr. Riggs," he said, his voice quiet, but it filled the room. "This territory is a wild place, but it is not a lawless one. The law, my law, does not and will not recognize the sale of human beings. Not for debt. Not for any reason." He turned to Evelyn. "A marriage, to be legal, requires free and full consent. It is clear to this court, there was no consent. There was coercion. It is also clear, by the defendant's own testimony, the marriage was never consummated." He picked up the forged paper from his table, and he held it up. "Therefore, this court finds that no legal, binding marriage ever existed between Evelyn Hayes and Harlan Riggs." He tore the paper in half, a symbolic gesture. "The marriage is hereby annulled, struck from any and all records. She is a free woman." Harlan was apoplectic. You can't. This is... And what about him? The warrant? He's a kidnapper. He's a branded criminal." The judge raised a weary eyebrow. "A warrant for kidnapping, you say? One cannot kidnap a person who was never property. One cannot kidnap a woman who, by her own sworn, public testimony, is a free agent who went willingly. As for his branded past, this court is not in Texas. Mr. Riggs, his actions here were that of a rescuer. The charges are dismissed. Marshal, release him." The marshal took a step back from Colt. He was free. Colt just stood there, swaying, as if he couldn't comprehend it. Harlan Riggs let out a roar of pure, humiliated rage. He knew he was beaten, not by the law, but by a slip of a girl, and a room full of witnesses. He stormed out of the hall, his men scrambling after him. "This isn't over," he screamed, but the door slammed shut, and he was gone. That night, the settlement was quiet. They had been given a small, private cabin. The threat was gone. The world was open and terrifying. Evelyn was by the fire, brushing her hair. Colt was standing by the window, his back to her, watching the moon. He was so still. "Colt," she said softly, we're free." He turned. His face, in the moonlight, was not joyful. It was haunted. "You're free," he said, his voice so low she barely heard it. You're Evelyn Hayes, the judge. He made you clean." She frowned. What are you talking about?" He looked down at his scarred hands. I'm still me. I'm the man from the prison farm. The branded man. The man who killed you. You're free of Harland. You're a lady again. You don't have to be tied to someone like me." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were raw with that old, familiar pain. The fear that he was not worthy. "Now that you're free," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Now that you can choose anything, anyone, do you still want me?" She stared at him. She stared at this beautiful, broken, noble man who had saved her life, who had seen her at her worst, and who was now, in her moment of victory, offering to set her free. A laugh bubbled up in her chest. It was the same rusty, disbelieving, joyful sound from the cabin. It shocked him. He looked at her, stunned. She crossed the room, the laugh turning into a sob of pure, unadulterated love. She threw her arms around his neck, wincing as she hit his sore shoulder, but she didn't care. "You fool," she whispered, her lips against his rough cheek. "You absolute, beautiful fool." She pulled back, her hands framing his face, forcing him to look at her. "I was never his," she said, her voice fierce. "I was never my father's. When I ran into those mountains, I belonged to no one, not even myself." She kissed him, a long, deep, possessive kiss. A kiss of promises made and kept. "I never belonged to anyone but you." They did not stay in the Valley of the Friends. It was a sanctuary, but it was not their home. The peace there was a borrowed, quiet thing, and they were people forged in fire. They needed a place of their own. Obadiah understood. He was a man who knew the human soul, and he saw that they needed to build, not just to be sheltered. He offered them a piece of land, not as a gift, but as a lease, paid for in work. "Thee will pay 100% of thy effort," he'd said, his kind eyes smiling, "and it will be thine." It was on the northern edge of the settlement's territory, high on a mesa that overlooked the vast, empty plains. It was wild land, with a stand of good pine, a spring that ran clear and cold, and a view that stretched to the end of the world. It was defensible. It was private. It was theirs. The building of the cabin was the building of their life. They began with nothing but their hands and the tools Obadiah lent them. Colt, his shoulder still healing, worked with a focused, grim determination. He was a man remaking his world from the ground up. He felled the trees, his good arm and his healing arm working in a new, awkward rhythm. The swing of the axe was a punctuation, a statement. "I am here. I am building. I will not be moved." Evelyn worked beside him. She, who had been raised to be a soft-handed preacher's daughter, now learned the bite of the saw, the weight of the adze. She cleared brush, her hands, long since healed from the canyon, becoming calloused and strong. She chinked the logs with mud and straw, her fingers pushing the earth into the gaps, sealing their home against the wind. The Quaker men came, one day as a quiet, efficient force. They did not ask. They simply arrived, and in a single afternoon, they raised the beams of the roof. They worked in their plain clothes, their movements a silent, communal prayer. Evelyn, her face smudged with dirt, her hair tied back in a rag, made them coffee and served the bread she had learned to bake in Ruth's kitchen. She sat with the women who came, and for the first time, she was not a patient, not a victim, not a runaway. She was a neighbor. The cabin was modest. It was one room, like the trapping cabin that had been their first refuge. But this one had 2 windows, and the door faced the sunrise. It was not a place to hide. It was a place to live. When the cabin was built, Colt began the fences. He split the rails himself, his movements growing stronger as his shoulder healed, leaving a puckered, angry scar that Evelyn would kiss every night. He was fencing a pasture, not to keep things in, but to define their space. He was building a boundary against the world, a perimeter of safety. Evelyn planted a garden. Ruth gave her the seeds. It was an act of pure, unadulterated faith. She broke the hard, high country ground, her back aching, and she planted roots, carrots, potatoes, onions. She planted herbs, the ones Ruth had used to heal Colt. She planted corn. She was, quite literally, putting down roots. She was betting on a future. She was betting that the ground would hold them. Their life was simple. It was brutal. The winters were harder than anything she had known, the winds a constant, screaming assault. The summers were hot and dry. But it was theirs. Every night, they sat by their own fire, in their own home. They ate the food she had grown and he had hunted. They spoke of the day. They spoke of the fences. They spoke of the garden. They did not speak of Harland, or her father, or the prison farm. Those things were ghosts. But their footsteps were fading. Their peace was an earned thing. It was not the soft, easy peace of the ignorant. It was the hard, calloused peace of the survivor. It was built of every scar, every bruise, every tear. Every moment of terror had been a stone laid in the foundation of this life. When he woke in the dark from a nightmare, his hands reaching, not for her, but for a knife. She would take his hand and place it on her heart. "You're here, Colt," she would whisper. "You're home. I am here." And when she cried out, her dreams filled with the smell of whiskey and the glint of metal in a drawer. He would hold her. He would not shush her. He would just hold her, his solid, scarred body a fortress, until her trembling stopped. "I've got you, Em," he'd rumble, his voice a shield. "I'm not letting go." The land changed them. It settled them. Evelyn, the runaway bride, became a presence in the territory. She started by helping Ruth. She had a steady hand, and she had a quiet, listening presence. The women in the outlying settlements, the wives of hard-drinking ranchers and desperate, failed homesteaders. They began to seek her out. She had a way about her. She was not a Quaker, full of peace. She was not a townswoman, full of judgment. She was something else. She was a woman who had, by her own account in a public hall, run. She became a midwife. She learned from Ruth, and she learned from the land. She delivered babies in sod huts and in the back of wagons, but she delivered more than babies. One afternoon, she sat with a young wife, a girl named Sarah, who had a husband with a heavy hand. Sarah had a bruise on her cheek that she claimed was from a pantry door. Evelyn just nodded, offering her a cup of herb tea. "This pantry door," Evelyn said quietly, looking into her own cup. "Does it lock you in?" Sarah's head snapped up. "Doors are strange things," Evelyn continued, her voice soft. "Some are for keeping the wind out, and some are for keeping a person in. I once knew a man who liked locks and belts." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Evelyn did not preach. She did not judge. She just said, "There is a judge, you know, a man named Thorne. He listens to women. And there is a long road, north. It's hard walking, but it's possible. I know a woman who did it." She was planting seeds. She was helping women escape the fates she had once feared. She was giving them the one thing she had never been given: a choice. Colt found his own purpose. He was a man who knew horses, and he was a man who knew pain. The Quaker settlement had taken in a number of orphan boys, children of the trail, left behind by cholera, or bad luck, or failed dreams. They were wild, angry, and broken. Obadiah asked Colt to help with the horses for the settlement, and the boys. At first, Colt was terrified. He was the branded man, a danger. He was not fit to be around children. "Thee is fit to be around horses," Obadiah had said simply. "The boys, they are just wild colts themselves. They need a gentle hand, a firm hand, not a weak one, not a cruel one." Colt found a boy, a teenager named Silas, who was all rage and sharp angles. Silas had been caught stealing, and he treated the horses with a casual cruelty that made Colt's blood run cold. One day, Silas struck one of the mares, a hard, open-handed slap. When she shied, Colt moved so fast Silas didn't see him. He didn't strike the boy. He just took his hand, the one he had used to hit the horse. He held it. His grip was steel. The boy, terrified, tried to pull away. Colt just held him. "She didn't do it," Colt said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. She bit at me." "She's afraid," Colt said, "just like you." You think being cruel makes you strong? It just makes you like them." He let go of the boy's hand. He turned to the mare, his whole body softening. He stroked her neck, his voice a low murmur. "Easy, girl, easy. He's just a fool. He doesn't know." Colt looked at the boy, who was rubbing his wrist, his face a mask of anger and fear. "The horse didn't make the world. Son," Colt said, his voice flat. "It just lives in it, same as you. You fight the world. You fight yourself. You guide the horse. You don't break it. You show it a better way." He realized, talking about himself. He began to train the boys. He taught them to ride. He taught them to break the wild mustangs, not with whips and spurs, but with patience, with a quiet, steady presence. He was giving them a worth he had never been allowed. He was giving them a trade, and in healing them, he was healing himself. Life settled into a rhythm. Seasons turned. The garden thrived. The pasture held 3 good horses. The cabin was warm. One night, it was high summer. The air was still. They were sitting outside on the small porch Colt had built, watching the stars. The sky was so clear. It looked like a spill of bright, white diamonds. It was so quiet, the kind of quiet that lets the old ghosts walk. Evelyn leaned her head against his good shoulder. It's so peaceful," she whispered. I still don't trust it. Sometimes, when it's this quiet, I still feel afraid." She admitted it. The small, dark seed of fear that she still carried. The fear that this was not real, that Harland would appear on the ridge, that the world would come to take it all away. Colt was silent for a long time. His arm tightened around her. He looked up at the vast, uncaring, beautiful sky. "So do I," he said, his voice a rough whisper. "Every morning, I wake up, and I check the door to make sure it's not the one on the prison farm. I check to make sure you're still there. That I didn't dream you." He kissed the top of her hair. His beard was rough against her skin. I reckon we'll always be a little bit afraid. We've seen the dark. We know it's there, but it's different now." She looked up at him. "How?" "We're not alone in it," he said. He took her hand, lacing his scarred fingers with her calloused ones. "Love walks with us now." Months passed. The vibrant summer faded into a gold and brown autumn. The first snows of winter came, and the world was white and silent again. But this time, they were in their own home, with a full larder and a warm fire. It was in the deep cold of winter that Evelyn knew. She had been tired. Her body felt strange. She had missed her time. At first, she thought it was the work, the hard year, but then the nausea came in the mornings. She was pregnant. The realization did not come with joy. It came with a wave of ice-cold, paralyzing terror. A child, here, in this world. A world with Harlands. A world that would brand a man like Colt. A world that would sell a daughter. She was terrified. She was terrified of the birth, a thing she had seen go wrong so many times. She was terrified of being weak, of being a burden. She was terrified of bringing a fragile, new life into a place of such profound, brutal hardship. She cried, but they were not tears of joy. They were tears of pure, unadulterated terror. She hid it from him. For a week, she was quiet, pale. He knew. He watched her, his gray eyes full of a new worry. But he did not press. He waited. Finally, she broke. He was oiling his rifle. The familiar, methodical sound in the quiet cabin. She was mending his shirt. "Colt," she said, her voice a tiny, choked thing. He stopped, the rag in his hand. "What is it? Em, you're sick." "No, I am with child." "Sss," she said it, and she covered her face with her hands, a great, tearing sob ripping out of her. She was terrified he would be angry, terrified he would feel trapped, like her father, trapped by a life he didn't want. He was silent. The silence stretched, filled only by her sobs. She felt, rather than saw, him move. He didn't speak, he just knelt. He knelt on the rough wooden floor in front of her chair. He was, she thought, a man who had never knelt to anyone, not to a judge, not to God. He gently, so gently, pulled her hands away from her face. His face. It was not angry, it was not fear, it was awe. He was looking at her as if she had just hung the moon in the sky. A child?" he whispered, his voice cracking. She nodded, a fresh wave of tears coming. I'm so afraid." "Afraid," he whispered, as if he didn't understand the word. He didn't touch her face. He didn't touch her hands. He reached out, his rough, scarred, calloused hand trembling, and he laid it on her belly, so softly, as if he were touching a ghost. A tear, his own tear, tracked down his face. "Afraid," he repeated. He looked up, and his eyes were full of a light she had never seen, a fierce, protective, blazing light. "Then I'll build a world for both of you." He bent his head. The branded man, the outcast, the killer, and he pressed his lips, his beard rough, his mouth soft, to her stomach, right over the plain wool of her dress. He kissed her. He kissed their child. It was a vow. The story ends in spring. It always ends in spring. The snows melted, and the land was reborn. Wildflowers, defiant and bright, pushed up through the hard ground around their cabin, purple and yellow, and a fierce, vibrant blue. Evelyn was standing barefoot in the new grass, the earth damp and cool beneath her feet. She was large now, her hand resting on the high, hard swell of her growing belly. She was watching the hills. She saw him, a dark speck, moving against the green. Colt, riding home. He was not running. He was not being chased. He was just coming home. To her. She smiled, her hand stroking the curve of her belly. "I took you," she whispered quietly to herself. To the child. To the wind. "You were so big, so broken. But I took you, and I'll keep you, always." He saw her. He spurred his horse, and quiet, the faithful gray, broke into a canter. He reached the fence line, and he did not slow. He swung down from the saddle before the horse had even stopped, just as he had that day he'd come to warn her. But this time, his face was not hard with fear. It was split in a wide, rare, beautiful grin. He reached her in 3 long strides. He did not hesitate. He did not ask. He just lifted her. His strong arms, one scarred, one whole, scooped her up, lifting her, pregnant belly and all. Off the ground. She laughed. It was not the small, shy giggle of a girl. It was not the rusty, surprised sound from the cabin. It was the full, throated, unashamed, glorious laugh of a free woman, a woman who had been to the dark and had come back. And in that laugh, in that one, clear, bright sound that echoed across the high, wild plains, was everything, every tear, every scar, every mile. It was the sound of survival. It was the sound of them. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment and let us know. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to From Wild West, and we hope you'll share your thoughts with us in English. We truly appreciate you being here.